Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. So today I'll go through all of the books that I read. I did DNF one book in October, which I think I'll talk about first. It is this one, Long Live Evil by Sarah Rees Brennan. I do some weekly videos, so I have spoken about this previously in one of those recap sort of weekly videos that I ran in October. I was really hoping for this to be really fun and evil and dark and mysterious. I went into this thinking it was something completely different than it was. It's basically about this girl who has a terminal illness and she ends up in one of her fantasy books. And this happens pretty early on in the book, and because she knows the story of the book that she's in and she knows all the characters, I found it a little bit confusing in terms of the world building and the info dumping. I didn't quite grasp what was really going on in this world because of the way it was written. I thought it was me at first, but then I saw some other people say that the exact same thing as me. I got to page 100 and I just realized this is not a book that I want to see to the end. I didn't really have too much interest in it. It was quite comical and satirical and also a bit meta. And while I can appreciate those types of books, it wasn't the vibe of book that I was hoping this was. And it wasn't what I was wanting to read in October anyway. It is a DNF, like a hard DNF, and I don't think I will ever go back to this book because I didn't enjoy the writing style. As I said, it was very info dumpy. You were given a mass amount of information, but the world building itself was a bit confusing because you found out something here and then you should talk about this and then you're like assuming that you know what's going on. And I think it's because the character itself knew the world quite well, so I think it was probably written to that extent, but I would rather have learnt the world in a more cohesive way as opposed to being told. You know, you got to show things instead of tell things, and there wasn't too much to show here. And I wasn't sure where it was going to go. Like she decided because she was in this book, in her fantasy book, she was going to be as evil as possible. So I could see how people will find this book fun and entertaining, but I had just read How to Become the Dark Lord and Die Trying. And that is a similar concept where they're trying to be as evil as possible. They're trying to be the Dark Lord. And I just read that book very soon before I started picking this one up. So I thought that there were a lot of similarities, and that book was also incredibly meta and also brought in a lot of like comical stuff or weird like pop culture stuff that honestly for me didn't really work too well. And I saw a lot of similarities with this one, even though in terms of the actual story itself, it seemed quite a bit different, but it was very similar in the same vein. So I DNF'd this one. I spoke a lot about that one. I don't know why I'm speaking so much about a book that I DNF'd. I did read quite a lot of crap, I would say, this month in terms of my enjoyments. I'm not doing this in any particular order, but I did also read this, My Roommate is a Vampire. I felt myself going into a slight reading slump, so I wanted to pick a book up that I knew was going to be really easy to read. I thought that I would enjoy this far more than I ended up enjoying, though. I think this is a good concept for a book, hence why I bought it. You know, you can see it's going to be a romance. It's going to be a silly romance about a girl who ends up being a roommate with a vampire. And I thought, how could that go wrong? Well, it could go wrong in many ways. And I think ultimately the way that it went wrong is the writing itself, I thought wasn't very good. I'll just put it at that. And I also thought that the story itself could have been developed a lot more. I also found the male character, the vampire, to be very cringy. His dialogue was pretty terrible. The dialogue throughout the whole book was pretty horrendous. It just didn't seem like they seemed like caricatures of people and not real people. And I have read quite a lot of romance books where I feel that is the set. That's like how people write books these days, or like these modern TikTok books. They write shells of characters and there's no depth to really anyone anymore. And I have realized that while it's really easy to read these books and it can take me out of a reading slump, I'm not going into this book expecting a 4 to 5 star. I'm just not. So this one, I think I gave it a 1 star, and I really should have DNF'd it, but I was like, no, I want to read it. It's like 300 pages. Like, why would I not read it when I went through it pretty fast? But the fact that I didn't really like the romance was kind of a bummer, because I went into this hoping that the romance would have a little bit of cute stuff or funny comical things, and for me it just didn't work out. I spoke about it again in one of my weeklies, and I was kind of mean about it. I think I said that it felt like a second draft potentially, and it just needed to be developed more, which, you know, I think we have to be critical readers at some point. We can't always give authors 4 or 5 stars when a book is really just not written very well. I would much rather be honest about how I feel about a book, as opposed to not, and just because I'm worried about hurting someone's feelings. I'm one person out of many in this world, more than I could count, and so does my opinion ultimately really matter? I just didn't think this was very good, so it's unfortunate, and it will most likely go in an unpull pile at some point. There's no point me keeping it. It's a shame. All right, I guess I am doing this in kind of order of what I liked. So I think I'll go to this one next, which is The Nesting. This is the last book that I read in October. This is by CJ Cook. I had really high hopes for this. I actually started a reading vlog with this in mind, because I didn't think this was going to be a 5 star, but I'm currently in a reading vlog trying to find a 5 star. So you will kind of gather that it's not here. But yeah, that one is currently ongoing. And this one, it was, the last book that I read in October. I think it started off really well. I thought the premise was really good, and it's like a really cold book. And for October, I definitely veered more towards darker, either thrillers or horrors, or just, you know, something a little bit more spooky than normal. Hence why I thought Long Live Evil was a letdown, because it didn't have that for me. It was too comical. And then My Roommate is a Vampire. I just needed to read something fast. But anyway, back to this one. This is about a girl who definitely has some trouble in terms of like her depression and stuff. And she, I feel like it should have been developed a lot more. And the beginning of the story feels very different to how the story ends, because it seems like her character shift was very instant, and it doesn't really make too much sense to me. But anyway, she ends up getting a job in Norway. She's in England. She ends up pretending to be someone else to get this job in Norway, because she wants to go to Norway. She's writing a book about, that's basically set in Norway. I think it's like a thriller or whatever. And she just jumped at this chance, and she got the job, and she needs to take care of 2 young girls because their mother passed away very recently, and the father is in Norway. He is an architect, and he is building a house on a cliff. And there's a lot of things going on in this book. I think maybe too much, to be fair. It does cross over to, like, there's some horror elements. There's the whole mystery element of what really happened to the mother, because, you know, did she commit suicide? Did she, you know, was she killed? What really happened to her? And then you're kind of wondering, well, was it this person? And then there's like little red herrings scattered around the book, which I actually kind of enjoyed. I didn't mind, because up until the end I was still thinking, I wonder what really happened, or how is this going to end? I feel like the ending was a cop-out. I feel like it was a non-ending in a way, because it didn't tie up all the loose ends that I had from reading the whole book in its entirety. I felt like there were a lot of moments in the book where, you know, we're spending a lot of time about maybe someone's infidelity, and also someone's depression, and someone's past history with their sister and the trauma about that. There's a lot of different little stories scattered around about all these people that are there, and also about Norway and the nature and this elk that keeps leaving footprints everywhere. And I didn't feel as though the book explained any of that at the end. And they didn't even leave it ambiguous to the point where I was like, oh, okay, I don't mind that I don't know because it could be this and this and this. It just seemed like it was forgotten about and the story just ended. So I didn't really like that. It would have been a 4-star for sure if it had ended well, but I ended up giving it like a 3-star. And I think it's a low 3, unfortunately. I don't know if I'll keep it in my collection, but it was definitely disappointing at the end. I also read Hex from Thomas Old Hubalt. This one I kind of struggled with. I started reading it last year and I put it down because I really just wasn't interested in it. So I picked it up again and started from scratch. I do feel like his books, it's the second book I've read. I've already spoken about this kind of quite a bit in one of my weekly videos, but I do find his books to be quite difficult. They are translated, and you know, I also found out that this version, the translated version, is different from the original Dutch version. The ending is apparently completely different too. This one apparently has more horror in the ending, which maybe I wouldn't even like the original ending, I don't know. But I don't know why. I can understand like the setting has to change because this is in America. And obviously the original book is in a Dutch town somewhere. I don't know. So obviously things have to change like that for it to make sense for, you know, English speaking people to read this book and be able to picture where the story is residing. So anyway, this is about a small town in Pennsylvania. They're very close-knit town. They don't really want anyone to move into town because there is a haunted witch who haunts the town, and also they are unable to leave the town because of this hex that's on the town, where if they leave, they have all of these feelings that they need to end their life and blah, blah, blah. So, you know, they are basically tied there. And as soon as you move into that town, that's it. You have to live there for the rest of eternity. So that's basically the concept. But obviously things go bad and things start going wrong because these teenagers start messing with the witch, because she basically walks around town, or she suddenly will appear in the corner of somebody's room and it's just a normal thing, and they'll throw a towel over her head so they don't have to look at her because her eyes are sewn shut and her mouth sewn shut because I think back like, I don't know, 200 years before or something, or maybe 100 years before, they had to do that because she was whispering to everyone to kill each other. I don't know. So she was whispering some dark stuff. She was treated very badly. She was, cast aside by her society 350 years ago. And ever since then, she's been just super mad and angry. So I don't really blame her for what really happened to her, because her story is a little tragic. But I don't know. I don't know how to. I ended up giving this like a 3.5, I think. I didn't quite enjoy it as his other book. His other book was very good, and in retrospect, I think it was quite emotional and reflective of the human like characters and like our feelings and how far we would go for somebody that we love ultimately. And I think there is that underlining theme in here because but it's more to do with a father and son relationship and what you would do. You know, there's like this whole thing about, you know, if you have multiple children, do you love one more than the other? So it's kind of a weird morality thing that's going on throughout the book. There are some gory elements towards the end that I didn't really appreciate because it was kind of gross, but I'm actually also glad he went there because I do feel like had they not been there, the book is actually not that scary at all. And I thought I would be scared of this book and I wasn't. It was a very slow burn horror book. And that's as much as I guess I will say. I don't know if I really would recommend it to anyone, to be fair, because I don't know really if I don't know anyone who would like this book. I'm not saying that in like a bad way. I don't know, because it's very slow. And that might not be such a bad thing, but I didn't think the concept was all that interesting at the end of the day, or executed. I don't know. But anyway, yeah, I read that one. So yeah, not a very good month for me. This one I read at the beginning of the month. This is The 10,000 Doors of January by Alex E. Harrow. Second book that I've read from this author. I thought this was going to be a 5-star. I tabbed it. I was like, oh yeah, it's going to be a 5-star because I did love Starling House. I've seen some people not like Starling House. I love Starling House. And this is completely different. This is also pretty slow. But I kind of like the concept. So there is a book within a book in this where you're kind of following this girl whose father has basically dumped her to live with this man that he works with. It's not in a weird way or anything, just so you know. He comes and goes, you know, every few months because he's off traveling, and she builds this kind of resentment towards her father. And eventually her father goes missing and she wants to break free and figure out what's going on. And all through that, she's also kind of realized that there are doors in the world that you can pass through and they go to like an alternative universe. And so that's pretty much kind of where we are in terms of what happens. I don't really want to give away too much of the story. I did end up crying at the end of this because it did get to me. It really did. So I do like this book. I gave it a 4 or maybe a 4.5. It wasn't quite a 5-star because I do feel like it was a little slow and sluggish at first. I was sluggish at first getting into it. And it never really picked up pace, I would say, but my interest just got a little bit more as I read more. But it never got truly exciting or anything like that. So it took me a little bit to read it, I'm going to be honest. But I thought it was a really sweet book. And it's kind of about, you know, following your heart, your dreams, and, you know, being adventurous in life. And loving your family, and there's definitely sweetness in it. I didn't realize, but I think it's a YA novel as well, but it doesn't matter. It's not really a romance at all. It's more of it's not even a coming of age, but I guess you could put it as a coming of age, but it really isn't. It's just more like an adventure book and these doors that lead to parallel universes and trying to find her father, if he exists, if he's alive, or finding out what happened and who she is as a person. So as I said, there's a book within a book. So she's reading a book in this story, and then you're kind of learning about these doors, and there's just this random book that turned up, and then it all ties up in the end, and you kind of figure out what's happened and what's going on and why you're reading all this. So I did enjoy it, and I don't know, maybe I would read it again. Knowing what happens, maybe I would read it a little bit faster and I'd get a little bit more from it. I don't know, but I'm definitely keeping this, obviously. I really, really enjoyed it, but not a 5-star, unfortunately. And then I think the best book that I read this last month was my best friend's Exorcism by Grady Hendrix. I really, really enjoyed this. This is not quite a 5-star. I gave it a 4.5. I think there were some parts of this book that I ultimately would have preferred to be left out of the story, but I really liked that he went there with the horror, and it was quite comical in a way, but ultimately I loved the friendship in this book, and it kind of hit me surprisingly. I didn't go into this book expecting to have a true friendship story about these two girls who honestly are friends for life, and it was the last few chapters were so sweet, and I was bawling my eyes out. So I think that's why I gave it a 4.5. Otherwise, it probably would have been a 4-star because it's such an easy book to read. It's written so clearly, and I think I binged this in like 2 days. And I have a busy life. I have a 4-year-old, so I can't read all the time, but I read this super fast. And it was very enjoyable, and it's like set in the 80s, 90s, it's a very nostalgic type of book and era. And of course, it's kind of goofy and weird because it's her best friend's exorcism, and there actually is an exorcism in this book. So it was a lot of fun. But then there's also some weird stuff happening with their other friends too that you're kind of watching along in horror. There's this moment with some tapeworms that I cannot get out of my head because I was thinking, am I actually reading this? Is this really going on, or is she just like imagining this? But I thought that was really fun and just kind of, you went down a little bit of a rabbit hole during that section of the book. And it reminded me of the movie Heathers, where you have all these girls who are like bitchy, horrible friends, and they're all called Heather. And it's Winona Ryder. She's like the outcast, because she ends up being more of an outcast. And then you see the weirdness that's happening with these girls. Not that Heather's like there's any like weird shit happening, but it gave me that same kind of vibe. And I was like, oh, this is kind of fun. So I just really enjoyed it. I'm so surprised it's written by a man. Honestly, I cannot imagine myself writing a story about teenage boys and their experience with life and their friendships and things, because this felt so true as a woman. I mean, I used to be a teenage girl, so I can relate to a lot of the cliques that just happen, and whether you're in or you're out, and it can flip from one day to the next. It was very true to form, and I don't know, I just really enjoyed it. So not quite a 5-star, but obviously I've rounded up to a 5-star on Goodreads. But yeah, if you haven't read this, I would recommend. I'm going to definitely read more from him, because I have heard obviously his name quite a bit. This is an older book. This is like 2017 as well. So it'd be interesting to see how his writing has evolved over the time, or if it's like the same. But yeah, definitely the best book that I read this month. So I have like 2 books that I enjoyed, and then the rest were mediocre or not very good. So unfortunately, not the best month. Not as good as September, I would say, but I'm still reading, so that's all good. As long as I'm still reading, picking up books, and trying to get into these other worlds, losing myself in them, then that is kind of what I want. So anyway, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all next time. Bye!